Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience. I'm here tonight with my first impressions of the Hifiman Prelude Headphone Amp. And this was loaned to me by Hifiman for a review, and this currently sells at $2,499. So I'm not going to be holding this up very long. Not only is it very heavy, but I don't want to take a chance on dropping something this expensive. So I'm going to sit it down and I will hold it up again in a few minutes, give you a closer look at all the features and the front and back of the amp. So anyway, this is a fully balanced Class A headphone amp. It has two analog inputs, both on the rear, both RCA single-ended and XLR balanced inputs. It has technically 5 headphone outputs. The way I come up with 5 is it has a 4.4 millimeter balanced output. It has a 4-pin XLR output. It has two 3-pin XLR outputs, which is technically one headphone output, but there's 2 of them. But the reason I'm going with 5 here is both of those are dual headphone outputs, where they're both a 3-pin XLR and a 6.3 millimeter single-ended. So if you look at the picture here, you see you've got your 2 3-pin, then you got your 4-pin, then you got this. So technically you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 headphone outputs. So, and then it has 2 preamp outputs on the back again, and once again RCA single-ended and XLR balanced. It uses an Alps potentiometer for the volume control. It has a 2-way gain switch. It has an OLED display which shows your input, your output, and your gain settings. And then the housing, the entire box that this thing's in, hold it up once again. The entire housing of this is machined out of one solid piece of aluminum. And I guess that's part of the reason for the weight, even though aluminum is known as being light, but this is a serious chunk of metal here. So anyway, the power ratings according to Hifiman, and these are from the balanced outputs, are 10 watts per channel at 32 ohms, 6 watts per channel at 64 ohms, 1 watt per channel into 300 ohms, or 560 milliwatts per channel into 600 ohms. And these are all at 0.1% distortion, which is well below the human threshold of hearing. The size of this thing is 13 inches wide, it's 10.5 inches deep, and it's 2.6 inches tall. So it's fairly large but not huge. The weight of this is 6.5 kilograms according to Hifiman, which works out to 14.3 pounds. And to be honest, it feels a lot heavier than that. But I think it's because it's relatively small. It just feels really heavy for its size, because I actually weighed it and it's too heavy for my kitchen scale, which only goes up to 11 pounds. So I weighed it on my bathroom scale, and it came in at 14.2 pounds, which is really close to what Hifiman claims. So 14.3 pounds, but feels much heavier. I mean, this is just a solid amp. So anyway, it has a signal to noise ratio according to Hifiman of 113 decibels. And I'm going to try to give you a close-up look of this. And like I said, I'm not going to hold it too long because it is heavy and hard to hold with one hand to show you the features. So here you can see the front, and once again you have your headphone outputs here, and 4.4 millimeter 4-pin XLR, dual 3-pin XLRs, and dual 6.3 millimeter single ended in the middle of those. You've got your volume knob here, which once again is an Alps potentiometer, and then you've got your 3 switches here for your input, output, and gain selections. And then let me spin this around. And on the rear, you have your 120 AC input, you have your on-off switch, and then you've got your, I forgot which is which here, I'll have to turn it around. You've got your inputs here, your XLR and RCA, and then your outputs, that'd be your preamp outputs here, which are, once again, RCA and XLR. And I don't believe that you can use the preamp outputs and the headphone outputs at the same time. That's where your switch comes in the front. You have to pick one or the other, or possibly both. I honestly don't remember. I have used this quite a bit. I've had it for a while actually, because I received a lot of equipment at the same time a while back, and I just haven't got to my review of this, but I've actually got many hours on this and listened to it quite a bit. So, I did want to point out, if you look at this close enough here, you can see that it says Prelude, but it also says Goldenwave. And I guess the story with that is that Goldenwave was a company that was building this, and my understanding is Hifiman bought that company, so Hifiman now owns Goldenwave. So this unit here actually says Goldenwave, Prelude Goldenwave on it, but I noticed on the Hifiman website the newer models don't, and there's no mention of Goldenwave. So this was one of the earlier models, so I'm guessing that this was built by Goldenwave for Hifiman, but my understanding now is that Hifiman owns Goldenwave, so they're not putting the Goldenwave name on it anymore. So if I'm wrong about that, someone let me know in the comments, please. So anyway, for listening to this, my listening that I've done so far, and I try to mention the equipment that I use because I think it's very important. A review that doesn't tell you what equipment that was used in the review, it's really hard to say. I mean, I've seen people rip on a $4,000 pair of headphones, and then it turns out they were using a $200 amp or something like that, you know, and had nothing good to say about the headphones, but they didn't have adequate equipment. So anyway, my review of this so far, and once again, this is just my first impressions, I was using a Cambridge Audio CD transport, and then I've used 2 different DACs with this so far, and the primary DAC that I've used is the iFi Audio Pro ISD Signature, which is about a $3,200 combination amp DAC, but it has an incredible DAC in it. I love the DAC. Actually a very good amp too, and I'll talk about that in a minute because I did kind of compare it. So anyway, the iFi Audio IDSD Signature, and then also the Topping D70S MQA version, which is my favorite under $1,000 DAC. And then as far as headphones, I primarily used 4 different headphones with this so far, and you can see in the photo behind me on the monitor, that's the Hifiman Susvara, which is pretty much, this amp is made for that headphone. But the Hifiman Susvara, the Hifiman HE6 SE, which is another extremely power hungry, very hard to drive headphone. And, you know, I'm so glad I have both of those now to test these amps to find out, you know, how much power they really are putting out, because those are the 2, the Susvara and the HE6 are 2 of the very hardest headphones to drive. Also the Hifiman HE1000 SE and the Hifiman Aria Organic. Those 2 are planar magnetics but much easier to drive. And then I did try a couple of very easy to drive headphones on this, like the Grotto SR80E, just to make sure that with all this power it wasn't producing any background hits. I wanted to try a very efficient headphone and came up with nothing. Very quiet amp. So, and I haven't tried it. I haven't gone as far as IEMs, but as far as headphones, full-size headphones, I don't think that there's, no matter how sensitive they are, I don't think you're going to pick up any background hiss on this. So anyway, getting into the sound, I would describe this as a warm, well, it has a very warm Class A sound to it, and Class A is known to just be warmer and more lush than non-Class A in your solid state amps. So anyway, it has almost a tube-like sound in my opinion, and I wouldn't go as far as saying like an OTL type tube amp, but more like a hybrid tube amp or maybe a transformer coupled tube amp, because I have a really good transformer coupled tube amp from Waveborn, and this actually has a very similar sound. So this amp has exceptional clarity and detail, just so clean sounding. And when I do my full review, I'm going to compare it to a couple of other amps where I can find out just how clean the sound is. But that really stood out to me, just black backgrounds and just a really detailed, really clean sound. The music has a lot of weight and a lot of body to it. It is not thin sounding, it is not sterile sounding, it is not analytical sounding. Even though it's highly detailed, it's doing so with a lot of warmth and more of a liquid sound, but like I said, it's got weight, and it's the bass is very solid and very punchy. This amp is very dynamic sounding, has a lot of punch to it. Really notice it in the sub bass and mid bass. As far as power, this thing has power to spare. More than enough power for even the Susvara and the HE6. It just takes total control of those headphones and drives them the way they are meant to be. You know, it's just, this thing does not lack power. It will play any headphone you have louder than you can handle it, and it's going to do it with complete control. No muddy bass, nothing distorted. I mean, it's just clean, and it's got as much power as you're ever going to need. What else was I going to say about this? Okay, I told you that I used the iFi Audio Pro ISD signature amp DAC as the DAC running into this. I used the XLR outputs out of that into this, used it as a standalone DAC, and compared it to the amp in the IDSD signature. Okay, I really like the amp in the ISD signature. It has a very good amp in it, but I think it's rated about 2 watts per channel. And it actually does a very respectable job with the Susvara. It really sounds good as long as you don't try to go too much above average listening. Like average listening levels or a little bit louder, that amp in the ISD signature, Pro ISD signature, actually does a very good job with the Susvara and has more than enough power for something like the HE1000 or the Aria Organic. Okay, but if you try to push the Susvara to a louder level, it falls a little bit short. That's where this amp really shines, because this amp, no matter how loud you try to push the Susvara or the HE6, it never runs out of power. It never runs out of current. If you try to go to too loud of volumes on the ISD signature, the bass reaches a point where it loses a little bit of its impact and a little bit of its tightness, and this is at loud volumes. Like I said, up to medium to loud, it does fine, but getting up into above medium loud, the ISD signature kind of runs out of power, and you notice it in the bass, where this doesn't. This just keeps going. So they actually have a very similar sound, and I love the sound of that, the amp part of the ISD signature. This sounds just as good, but it's got a lot more power behind it and can push a headphone like this as far as you want to go with it. I also did a kind of brief comparison between this and the Waveborn Edelweiss 3 Power Amp Plus, very long name, and I think they should consider shortening the name a little bit because it's a fantastic amp, but no one can remember that long name. So anyway, that is a transformer coupled tube amp that I absolutely love. It was the last year or the year before I rated it my headphone amp of the year. Okay, I love the way that amp sounds, and it just has this beautiful, warm, rich sound, but super detailed. Well, this reminded me of that, so I did a brief comparison, and yes, they do sound very similar. And that one's limited, I think, at about 3 watts per channel, even though I think that's conservative. And to be honest, that Waveborn amp does a very respectable job driving the Susvara, but this has more power to back it up and will push it further if you want to listen at loud volumes. And people just seem to crave power when they're listening to the Susvara. And to be honest, I tend to listen to it too loud because it does thrive on power. The Susvara just wants more and more power. That's why some people actually derive it from the speaker outputs of speaker amps. But I tend to listen to it louder than I listen to other headphones, and that's not a good thing, really. So, you know, you got to be careful with the Susvara, because the more power you give it, the better it sounds, and this amp is perfect for that. But it's very easy to listen to it at volumes that could, you know, actually do some hearing damage, and I don't want to do that, or I'm going to be out of the review business. So anyway, before I do my full review, I want to compare this to some other amps I have, and the main one I want to compare it to is the Audio GD Master 9. And that's been sort of my reference amp for quite a while now, about 4 years. It's big, it's like 4 times the size of this, it's over twice the weight of this. It has a similar power rating and actually a similar sound. It's Class A and it's got a nice warm sound. And before I do my full review, I am going to compare this extensively to the Audio GD Master 9, and we'll see what happens with that. I've also still have the Burson Conductor 3 reference, which has almost as much power as this. Very respected amp, and see how this compares to that. And I just recently got in the Topping A70 Pro, which is much smaller, much lighter, but actually has a similar power rating as this amp. So I want to see how that holds up against this. And I did do a very brief comparison, and the A70 Pro is extremely clean and detailed, but it's doing it with less warmth than this, and it's a little more on the sterile side than this is. So that topping stuff, it measures incredible, but it can be a little bit on the sterile side, where this isn't. This has a warm, lush sound with a lot of punch to it. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up this first impressions. I'll try to get back in about a month with my full review of this amp and see what else I come up with to compare it to in the meantime. So, but bottom line, I really like this so far. It has a really great sound and tons of power. I'd say the only thing I don't like about it is compared to like the Master 9. The Master 9 has 5 inputs. This only has 2. The Master 9 has 3 outputs. This has 2. That's not too bad, but for an amp this size, I would kind of like it. It'd be nice if it had like one more input, like maybe 2 sets of XLR inputs on it. And besides from that, the volume knob's a little bit small. For a big amp like this with this much power, I'd prefer the volume knob was a little larger, because with that much power it's a little bit touchy, but you do have the gain control, high and low gain. That's another thing. Maybe a third gain setting would be nice too. When I get into really powerful amps, it's nice to have 3 gain settings, but 2 is usually adequate. But anyway, I'm picking at small things because so far, really liking this amp. So I'll get back to you in about a month with my full review, hopefully. And once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And the Headphone Experience on Facebook is up to 30.6 thousand members. Still growing really fast. So you're all welcome to join us over there. And once again, thanks for watching my video.